Chapter 14. The rest of Saturday night passed in a whirl. Dinner started out pretty quiet. I didn't feel much like talking, and I could tell James was still upset about what I had done to Manda. All I wanted to do was go hide in bed, but Mr. H made James and me cook dinner together in the kitchen. It was awful at first, but then James began to relax a little. By the time we sat down to eat, things were almost normal. We talked about all sorts of things that evening. James and I argued about who we thought would win the Super Bowl. Mr. H said he didn't care because the only real American sport was baseball. We agreed that all sports had become too commercial. James mentioned a new movie he had seen a preview for, and we talked about our favorite actors and types of movies. Mr. Hassler just sat and listened to us. I got the feeling he was trying really hard not to laugh at us. Mr. H and James talked about the harvest for a while. I listened, even though not much of what they said made any sense to me. Most of the work had been done before I was there, but I listened because I wanted to know about the ranch. I wasn't involved in its past, but I wanted to be involved in its future. I wanted to ask Mr. H if the judge had asked him about letting me stay on a semi-permanent basis, but I was afraid of the answer I might get. So instead, I asked about working on the ranch during the summer camp. "Well," he drawled, "I think that would be a possibility. I hire 6 wranglers each summer, and they've always got first choice to return if they want to. But it seems to me that 2 or 3 of them from last year said they might not be returning next summer." James agreed, his eyes laughing at me. "What do you mean by wrangler?" "Stable hand," he replied. "Guide for the rides." "Oh," I said quietly. "What's wrong?" James asked. "I could help in the stable, but I don't know how to ride." I was trying to hide my panic, but I don't think I did a good job. That could be a problem," Mr. H said, rubbing his cheek thoughtfully. "Yeah," James agreed. "I think it might even be a big problem." I could tell he was just kidding me, but I really didn't feel like laughing. I should have known that you'd have to be able to ride in order to get a job at a ranch. "The other thing my wranglers do is cook, but in the summer I've got 20 kids here a week. You'd have a lot of learning to do in the kitchen." "No offense, Sean, but from what I've seen so far, I think trying to teach you how to cook for 20 kids and all the wranglers would be a lost cause." "Even though we would probably keep the fire department in business," James said with a laugh. "Of course," Mr. Hassler continued, still thinking, "we are talking about next summer." "And summer is still months away," James added. "How long do you reckon it takes a man to learn how to ride?" Mr. H asked James. "I don't know," James said, shaking his head. "It would depend on how badly he wanted to learn, and how much time he was willing to spend on it. And," he added with an evil grin, "it would depend on how sore he's willing to get." I looked from one man to the other. "Are you saying maybe I could learn to ride in time to get a job?" "It's a definite possibility, Sean." "A better possibility than your cooking," James interrupted, chuckling. Mr. H shot him a look, and he shut up. Mr. H continued in a serious tone of voice. "But let's work on one day at a time, okay? Come springtime, you may have decided you're tired of listening to an old man." "I won't be," I said confidently. "Can I have some more hot fudge?" That Sunday morning was the first one in my memory where I got up early and really didn't mind it. I knew that Nicker was depending on me for breakfast, and a lot of other horses, cows, and llamas were too. And in a not so evident way, so was Mr. Hassler. I spent the first hour mucking out the horse stalls, and then 45 minutes on the cow and llama barn. My shoulders slowed me down a little, but I was determined to finish. I knew if I couldn't do one chore, then I wouldn't be allowed to do the others. I worked with Nicker some more. I was very proud of him. I could come up and just slip the halter over his face, and he didn't try to run or fight me at all. He was also pretty good about being groomed. At least he was good for the first 5 or 10 minutes. Then he'd get antsy and wouldn't want to sit still for me. He'd much rather play tag. Mr. H told me that we should start trying to get him to eat small amounts of warm oats mashed in milk that evening, and then try to increase the amount each day until he was completely off the bottle. He said it wouldn't feel as natural to Nicker as bottle feeding, but it would be a little more practical. Nicker was acting more and more like a puppy around me. It worried me a little, but I also kind of liked it. Besides, I didn't really know how a foal was supposed to act anyway. Mr. Hassler had sandwiches ready for James and me when we came up for lunch, and then he had an extra surprise. "Why don't you two take the afternoon off and go catch that movie you're all talking about last night?" James and I looked at each other. "But I began. James reached across the table quickly and covered my mouth with his hand. "Sean, you ain't been here long enough to understand, but when boss lets you take the day off, you take it with no questions asked," he said, grinning. "Okay," I said with a shrug. "Can I just stay and take the afternoon off with Nicker?" James shook his head vehemently. "If you're around, he'll find something for you to do. We get the day off, we take it, and we take it to town. Those are the basic survival rules you need to know." Okay, sorry," I said, getting up to start the dishes. "However," I heard James say, "I think you need to go with us, boss." Mr. H just laughed all the way out of the kitchen. "Well, you tried," I told him. Yeah, it was the least I could do when he gave us a holiday. He also told me the first show starts in half an hour, so we better get cranking. "Does that seem strange to you?" "What do you mean?" "Well, it kind of feels like he's trying to get us out of the house, like he wants to get rid of us." "Nah," James said. "This is just something he does every once in a while. We were talking about movies the last couple nights, and he probably decided this morning to look up show times and give us this surprise. It doesn't mean anything." "Okay," I said, but I wasn't entirely convinced. As we headed into town, an idea entered my mind and just wouldn't let go. I had to see if it was possible. "Hey James, can we swing by my house real quick?" "Why?" "I need to get a phone number and my math book. I should try to do the next few pages before I go back tomorrow. Mr. Haverneal is the pickiest teacher about accepting late work." James looked at me kind of funny, but he really didn't argue because he knew Mr. H wanted me to do homework. There was a note stuck on my front door and I grabbed it on my way inside. My heart skipped a beat as I briefly considered that the note might be from my father. It was from Lee. I skimmed it on my way to the phone. Some gibberish about Rick looking for me to even the score. I dropped the note in the trash and made the phone call as quickly as I could. I got the answer I wanted, and I whistled all the way back to my room. I picked up my math book, and then, just on a hunch, I checked two of my mother's hiding places for cash. I struck out on the first one, but found nearly $45 in the second. It made me feel scuzzy to sink to her level, but it couldn't be avoided. I no longer just wanted to do this, I needed to. The movie was great. I've always enjoyed science fiction movies, and this one was better than most. I tried to pay for the movie, but James said the boss had slipped him some cash to pay for both of us. After the movie, he dragged me into a cheap department store. "I know this place probably doesn't have all the fashion stuff that you like," he started, but then a hand came down hard on my bad shoulder and I yelled out. I turned around and Mrs. Walker was staring at me wide-eyed. "My God, Sean, I didn't mean to scare you that badly." "You didn't," I said gingerly, touching my shoulder. I explained what had happened as quickly as I could. I didn't quite tell her everything that I had done to Amanda, but that was more because I didn't want to think about it. "I'm so sorry," she said when I had explained. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted to say hi and see how you're doing." "Geez," I said, "I'm seeing more of you this week than I do when I'm in school." "Now I know you're not complaining," she said with a grin. "How's your week been?" "Fine," I said. I always felt awkward seeing teachers outside of the school. It just didn't seem natural anywhere else. "Is Nicker still doing all right?" "Yeah," I said, smiling in spite of myself. "He's doing real well." "I'm glad to hear it. You'll be back tomorrow, right?" "Right, and I'll be in class, not in-house." "Good," she said. "We need you back in class." She paused for a moment. "Do you have your paper done?" "Almost," I said, stretching the truth a bit. "We better get going. See you tomorrow morning." "Okay," she smiled. "Tell Dave I said hello. I'll try to drop by again soon." I laughed and shook my head. It was cool in a way that she cared, but really, enough was enough. We said goodbye, and James continued what he had started saying earlier. "Boss thinks you need some new jeans. He thinks you're going to wear yours out pretty soon, working like you have been. So he said I'm supposed to rig you out in a uniform. something that will be comfortable for work. Blue jeans, maybe a flannel shirt, and some t-shirts, and a sturdy pair of shoes. Oh, hey, let's just go back to my house. I can pick up some more clothes. James looked at me. Can you make them look like we just bought them for you? I thought about my wardrobe. The newest thing I had was a t-shirt from a concert 6 months ago. He wants to do this, Sean, he insisted. He knows how hard you've been working, and he expects you to keep it up. I still wasn't sure. Look, you're not going to have to wear this stuff to school if you're worried about how you'll look. You'll just have some warm work clothes. I ended up with 2 pairs of jeans, 3 t-shirts, and a couple flannel shirts. I could fit the mountain man look now with no problem, except that wasn't my style. We started home. Hey, James, I said casually as I could, do you mind making one more stop? He looked at me out of the corner of his eye. What kind of stop? Well, I'd kind of like to get something for Mr. Hassler. That's what I made the phone call for, and it'll be a quick stop, I promise, I said in a rush. He laughed. Well, that's all fine with me, Sean, but you didn't tell me what we're stopping for. Oh, great, I thought. What am I supposed to tell him now? I was afraid he'd say no, but if I didn't tell him anything, I'm sure he wouldn't stop. My friend's dog had puppies, I said in a bored tone, trying to not sound too hung up on the idea, and they're selling them for $10 each. I thought if I gave him a puppy, he couldn't turn it down. Oh, Sean, he groaned, you put me in one heck of a pickle. He thought about it for a few minutes, and I could tell he really didn't know which way to go. You said the other night that you think he should get another dog, I argued. Yeah, but it's also not the kind of thing you should force on a person. Getting a pet is a responsibility you should take on yourself, not a decision someone else should make for you. Well, I said, thinking quickly, if he really doesn't want it, we'll take it back, or I'll find another home for it. Sean, he'll blame me for this. No, he won't. Yes, he will. I'm the one driving, remember? Okay, so we'll say I ran away, and then I'll walk up the drive with the puppy. He'll blame me for letting you get away. Please, James, I want to get him a puppy. He sighed and looked at me. You do know how to make things difficult. I just sat there and kept my mouth shut. Finally, he said, Well, where do I go? When we pulled up to the house, not only did we have the puppy, we also had a 20-pound bag of food, 3 chew toys, and a box of puppy treats, and a sleeping basket. The puppy was a Shepherd Labrador mix. He was a soft, fuzzy ball, black from the tip of his nose to the tip of his tail, with just a small white spot on his front right paw. I hesitated outside the front door. James had refused to come in with me. Depending on how he takes this, he had said with a strange grin, this is either your battle to fight or your gift to give. Either way, I'm staying out of it. Chicken, I muttered at him. Yes, he had agreed. I like chickens. The wild ones live longer than most birds. I slipped silently into the house. Mr. H was sitting in his favorite chair, pipe nearly falling out of his mouth. He had the paper spread out in front of him, but his eyes were closed. I didn't know what to say, so I knelt down and let the puppy go. He went off exploring, looking for new scents and people. When he discovered Mr. H, he cocked his head to one side and stared at him. Suddenly he burst into a series of puppy yips, and I don't know who jumped higher, me or Mr. Hassler. What the? He yelped, throwing the paper up and over everything, including the puppy. His pipe fell out of his mouth and bounced on the floor, smacking the puppy on the nose. The puppy began whimpering and immediately made a puddle on the floor. Where in the blazes did you come from? Mr. H shouted, grabbing the newspaper to mop up the puddle. I stuck my head in the room. Hello, we're back, I said, doing my best to smile. Did you forget to drop something off at the pound, or are we having a really fresh Chinese delicacy for supper? The puppy may not have understood what was said, but he certainly understood the tone. He slunk over to me with his tail tucked firmly between his back legs. I knew exactly how he felt. I charged on ahead anyway. You need a puppy, so I got one for you. I told you, Sean, I'm too old for a puppy. Why don't you listen to what people say? I heard what you said, but I didn't think you meant it. He looked at me. It's really amazing what can be said without any words. Well, okay, I knew you meant it, but I thought maybe he could change your mind, I said, nodding toward the puppy. Why does my mind need changing? I'm sorry, it's just that my friend's dog had puppies, and after the conversation the other night, I thought I could help both of you out. Find a home for one of his puppies, and a companion and a fox chaser for you. He can't stay. Okay, I'll find another home. Why don't you and James take him back to his mama? I can't do that. It'd be like lying to my friend. I'll just find another home for the puppy. And just how long do you think that will take? A day? A week? A year? I don't know, I admitted. But I'll find him a home, I swear. Anyway, I added, he'll go when I go. I can't believe this, Mr. H growled. Well, if he's here for a little while, you and James might as well get him some food and line a box for his bed. On cue, James stepped through the front door, loaded down with the puppy supplies we had purchased. When Mr. H cleared his throat, James looked up at him and then looked away quickly. I hurried forward to help him. The puppy nearly tripped me, still trying to stay safely behind my legs. Oh, Lord, help me keep these young pups in line, I heard from Mr. H mutter as he left the room. That evening, Mr. H dug out a typewriter for me to use. It was so old I could barely recognize what it was. He sat me at the kitchen table, gave me a fresh pack of paper and a dictionary, and told me he didn't want me leaving the kitchen until I was done with my paper. Then he left for his favorite chair in the living room. I followed him a few minutes later. I know you're not done yet, he said around his pipe without looking up. No, I can't start. Now he looked up. Why not? I don't know how to plug it in. You don't plug it in, he said, looking at me like I was from an unknown planet. Then how does it turn on? He folded the paper in his lap. You don't turn it on. Huh? It's manual. He put his hands up to his forehead as if he were in great pain. The harder you strike the keys, the darker the letters. I turned to go try this manual typewriter. And you can't just delete your errors, he called over his shoulder. So be careful. I will never complain about computers again. My fingers kept slipping in between the keys, and it hurt. Plus, I kept messing up. I started the paper over at least 8 times before I gave up on neatness, and I decided to just cross out the mistakes. I finished a sloppy copy of my paper, but I was too frustrated to try to make it any neater. I went back through my journal entries, adding and changing things. We were supposed to make daily entries, but I had hoped Mrs. Walker wouldn't know the difference. Mr. Hassard came in and told me to take a 15-minute study break at 8:30. No, that's okay, I said. I'll just keep going. I figured that since he didn't have a TV, I might as well just get the work done. It's a good idea to take a little break. It keeps the mind going and gives the fingers a rest. He stopped for a second. Maybe this would be a good time to reach your father. I looked at him, but he was digging in the cupboard for the instant coffee. I pushed my chair back and headed to the living room, where I simply stared at the phone for a good 5 minutes. What was I going to say? I knew I had to call him, but I promised myself that if the bimbo answered, I would hang up again. I picked up the phone and slowly dialed the number. Hello? Hi, Dad. It's me, Sean, I said in a rush. Hi, Sean, he replied. I could hear the hesitation in his voice. Neither of us said anything. It was awful. Finally, I just blurted out, I'm sorry, and for no apparent reason, I felt a tear slip down my cheek. He let out a long sigh. No, Sean, I'm the one who's sorry. I'm sorrier than you'll ever know. I'm sorry for everything. No, Dad, I said. For some weird reason, I couldn't stand to hear him say that. It's no big deal. I was just being a brat. And I was being pretty pushy. Hey, can we stop apologizing now? I asked. He chuckled a little. Sure. He paused briefly. Are you at home? No, I said. I'm at Mr. Hassler's. He's got a great ranch here. I see. Another pause. What have you been up to lately? I squirmed. I'm still doing my community service hours. I see, Dad repeated slowly. I helped deliver a foal on my first day here. I I said, and then I could have kicked myself. I sounded like a little kid trying to show off. Is that so? What's his name? Nicker. Even I could hear the pride in my voice. I see. That awkward silence fell again. This time I didn't know what else to say. Sean, Dad said, clearing his throat. Could we get together sometime this week? I think we've got a lot to talk about. Yeah, I said, I guess so. Is there a day that works well for you? I couldn't believe he just didn't tell me when we'd be meeting. I don't really think it matters. How about after school tomorrow? Could we make it Tuesday? I asked. Sure, he said. I felt like a jerk, but at the same time I liked hearing the uncertainty in his voice. Just because I have a lot of makeup work to do tomorrow night, I explained. I'm glad to hear you're worried about your schoolwork. Tuesday sounds fine. Can I pick you up at your mom's around 3? As long as you'll drop me off here, I said. Is that all right with Mr. Hackler? Hassler, I corrected. Yes. Then I guess it's all right with me, he said, but I could tell he didn't like it. It made me feel good to know he didn't like it, but I wasn't going to change my plans just because it bothered him. He hadn't done much in the last few years, so how was I to know if he was really going to change this time? Well, I'll see you Tuesday, I said, wanting to end the conversation. Yeah, Sean, see you Tuesday, he hesitated. Take care of yourself, okay? Yeah, Dad, you too. And I hung up the phone. When I returned to the kitchen, there was a tall glass of milk and a plate of cookies waiting for me. Mr. Hassler wasn't in sight. I laughed, but this time it wasn't because I thought it was stupid. I managed to complete a fairly neat copy around 10. I went to show it to Mr. H because he had been giving me so much grief about it. He was still in the easy chair, but the pipe had fallen out of his mouth, and he was snoring lightly. The puppy was curled up in a ball at his feet. I started to back out of the room when a thought struck me. I almost didn't have the courage to do it, but I thought to myself, what goes around comes around, and I did it anyway. There was an old blanket folded in the corner of the couch, and I spread it out over him, doing my best not to wake him. The puppy woke up, so I picked him up and took him outside for a few minutes so he could do his thing. Then I turned the light off in the living room, and I snuck quietly upstairs with the puppy.